What the Feminism is a well researched podcast which sheds light on intersectional feminism in India. Though recommended for everyone, it is largely aimed at South Asian audiences. If anyone is hurt by any feminist comment made in this podcast, we advise you to get checked for a possible condition of misogyny, misandry, homophobia, or something of that sort. Our socials are always open for suggestions or messages. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello, everyone. I hope you're well and safe. This is June, and I wish all of you a very happy Pride Month. Welcome back to What the Feminism. This is the fourth episode, and it's funny because I've given up on everything except this podcast. So, congratulations to you, to me, and everybody else who is still listening to my extremely mundane voice. Anyways, without any further ado, let's get started. So, in this episode, we'll dissect Indian marriage customs and take a feminist approach to these traditions. As we know, weddings vary according to the region, the religion, and the community. Since India has so many communities, I'm not going to dwell much into the traditions of each group. But if you want to refer to them, I've put some links down below. So please check them out. Now, to understand modern marriages, we would have to go back in time, back to the Vedic age, when classical Orthodox Hinduism gained prominence and society began moving to patriarchal and caste based rules. In this period, Hindu scripture spoke of 8 types of marriages, but only 4 of them were approved forms. The most respected and popular form of marriage was Brahma, in which there was no system of dowry and it was also free from any physical force. This may seem very righteous and honorable, but if we really think about it, this form of marriage was more concerned with social recognition. Mutual consent of both partners was not something that mattered. Also, you may have guessed it, Brahma marriage was fit for Brahmins, and even though the Kshatriyas did practice it to some extent, a person's caste played a big role in their marriage. Moreover, love marriages were discouraged by the Hindu society. Gandharva marriage, or love marriage as we call it now, was a form of marriage that was not approved because emotions, lust, or mutual consent were not valued at that time. So, even though these type of unions were prevalent, there was no ceremony associated with it. One of the examples of this would be the tale of Shakuntala and King Dushyanta. It is a beautiful story and you should read it if you can. With the settling of Muslim rulers, local cultures also began incorporating practices like the parda. For those who don't know, parda involves the seclusion of women from public observation by means of concealing clothing. Child marriages and practices like sati and dowry were also prevalent from a long time. In the Victorian era, marriages to Indians and Anglo Indians were frowned upon. Not to forget, women who married high ranking officials didn't have much to say, and their role was to support their husbands socially. The family was structured in such a way that men were supposed to be the breadwinners, while women had to take care of the household and the children. Titles, property, and wealth were passed from father to son. This type of patriarchal system had a perfect pinch of internalized misogyny, where older women of the family were in charge of the younger women to keep them within the rules of the society. The condition of women was definitely bad, but women from lower castes were subjected to the worst forms of brutality. Violence, intimidation, and public shaming were done in order to control women's actions. As we have discussed in earlier episodes, there were a lot of social reformers who agitated for women's rights during this time. India was able to pass some laws like the Child Marriage Restraint Act of 1929 and the Bengal Sati Regulation of 1829. However, we must not forget that the British, Hindus, and Muslims are all responsible for the degradation of human rights, especially women's rights in India. Hindu scriptures already contained biased ideas. Muslim conservative practices added more to these thoughts, and the British capitalized on these problems for their own good. Basically, traditional marriages were more associated with the preservation of ancestral lineage and extension of family property. Marriages were treated as an alliance between two families rather than a union between two individuals. But when did these ideals change, and what is the future of marriage now? A major change that we see in postmodern society is the separation of work from family life. Because of this, families transitioned from large extended family systems to smaller nuclear households. Education among women became common, and the economic dependence of one partner on another increased. The ideals of marriage have also shifted to emotion and intimacy. People began marrying for love instead of an exchange for resources. People also started projecting their choices. Some opted for divorces, some became single parents, and some partners remained childless, and some did not even marry. Earlier in India, monogamy was generally practiced, but polyandry, polygamy, and bigamy were also popular. But at this time in day, monogamy is being followed by most people. Though there have been changes in societal practices, the effect is not uniform. Even after various laws and reforms, India is estimated to have over 1.5 million child brides. Domestic violence against women is also on the rise. 30% of women have experienced domestic violence at least once from when they were aged 15, and this number increased by 53% during the lockdown. India also reports the highest number of total dowry deaths in the world. Women are verbally and physically abused, made to do all the housework, and even financially controlled when their family is not able to pay their dowry. As of June 2022, India is one of the 36 countries where marital rape is still legal. Although giving and receiving dowry is a criminal offense, it is still widely practiced in India, and the numbers are on a steady rise. Listen, I have to say this because no one else will. Your daughter is not a commodity. She is an individual of her own, and you do not have to marry her off in order to make her life. Only if people invested in a girl's education rather than a dowry, perhaps the women in our society would be a lot safer. What I've talked about until now is mostly about heterosexual marriages. On 6 September 2018, the Supreme Court issued its verdict. The court unanimously ruled that Section 377 is unconstitutional as it infringed on the fundamental rights of autonomy, intimacy, and identity, thus legalizing homosexuality in India. This was a big win for the community and also one for the feminist movement. However, violence against LGBT groups still prevails today, and there's a lot of work to be done. Indian society is far from accepting different gender and sexual orientations. Interfaith, intercaste, and same sex couples often face persecution from their families, and honor killings take place in our society too. There have been reports of fraudulent schemes that claim they can heal homosexuality. As ridiculous as that sounds, it's worth noting that a lot of people actually opt for these methods. Now, I know that homosexuality is something very normal, but the inaccuracy and superstitious beliefs of the people are appalling. I found a very informative article on how the LGBTQ plus people face violence in India, and even though I'm planning to do a detailed episode on that later, you can read the article. It's in the show notes. It's not a secret that many patriarchal customs are still practiced in marriages today. For example, it's usually the bride who has to change her last name after getting married. Women generally take care of the household, and this unpaid labor often goes unrecognized. Men carry the burden of being the dominant masculine breadwinner, and this affects their mental health to a large extent. Bollywood and other industries have also contributed to these biases. Breaking these gender roles will take time, But steps like prioritizing education for girls and making them financially independent, especially for the most marginalized people in our society, will help. Slowly and steadily, India is moving towards a feminist setting of marriages. Couples are breaking gender norms, battling societal pressures, and helping each other overcome their struggles. As one might say, more frequently this month, love is love. With this simple sentence, one can hope that things turn out for the better. So that is it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. As usual, the research material is in the show notes. Make sure you check that out. If you're new here, maybe you could follow us and share this episode. If you're old, thank you so much for sticking with us. Our socials are down below, so make sure you check that out too. We post memes and we're gonna start posting reels too. So, yeah, there's some big stuff coming up. Anyways, that's it for today. Bye. Stay safe.